Hello, Montessorians, and thank you so much for joining us. This is our second installment of our coaching calls, and today we're going to discuss the Montessori Family Life Cycle. Here with me today is the founder of Needle Marketing, Matt Hillis. Matt, thanks so much for being here.
Super excited to be on the call, Awesome.
And if you don't mind, let's dive right in. Matt, would you give us an overview of the Montessori Family Life Cycle?
Sure. There's nothing that is actionable, and by that I mean this is a 50,000-foot view of the family's process as they first look into your school, as they enroll, as their child starts in a assistance infancy classroom, in a primary classroom, as they go through the program, if you have an elementary, if they're moving up to elementary, when they're graduating, and when they're moving out into the world. So there is nothing that you need to do besides understand. And the reason we do this is because before we get into specific tactics that we're using, specific tools, marketing strategy, we really want you to understand the phases that most Montessori families go through. And this may vary slightly according to schools and community, but I think it's safe to say that most families, when they are choosing a Montessori school, enrolling in a Montessori school, and are experiencing what it's like to be a member of your community, they're going to go through these different phases of what we call the life cycle. So another thing to point out is that this is not a linear process. So there are times when you may feel like we're taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back. They may have 1 foot in the commitment phase, for instance, and 1 foot in the engagement phase. And then they may go back a little bit, especially as they're transitioning between levels. I think that that's pretty common. So this is not a linear process where they're moving from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They may go 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 5, etc. So don't think of it as a completely linear process, and just know that there is a lot of crossover as we start to move families through this stage of their development.
And this has, Matt, there's some redundant phases here between the life cycle and the admissions funnel, which is what we talked about last week. Can you speak a little bit to the difference, why we have the admissions funnel and why it's separate from the life cycle?
Sure. I mean, so the admissions funnel is basically it starts much earlier, as we've talked about in the admissions funnel. That could even start when somebody's in college and they're learning about different approaches to early childhood education. So the admissions funnel is basically all the way from the point where they're first getting aware of what Montessori is, all the way to when they are enrolling at your school and starting. That really actually encompasses most of the exploration phase here, section 1 of the family life cycle, and parts of the commitment phase. But what we're really looking for in the family life cycle is how they're moving through your school. And for some of us, they could be at our school for 8, 9, 10 years, or maybe more if you have an adolescent program or a high school. So this is really more about the family's process, not necessarily the parents' process, but the whole family, including the child, and what they are receptive to, what their needs are, all different aspects of their experience as they are moving through your school.
Let's go phase by phase, if you don't mind. Can you introduce the exploration phase and tell us a little bit about why it's important?
Sure, of course. Well, and it's important because we want mission-appropriate families in our school. A great way to ruin your school is to just admit anybody who comes in and wants to put in an application. I know we've all experienced this, right? Where you have somebody that comes in and for whatever reason, you're across the street from where they work, or you're across the street from where they live, or they have a family member who really likes your school and they want to enroll because they want to be close to their family. That is not necessarily a bad thing. All those things are not like red flags where we can't enroll them. However, what we really need to do is to be thoughtful about how we are introducing them to Montessori, and to set clear expectations about what we're doing, because we really want them to to understand, obviously, that the method that we're employing with their child, and it's going to be much different than what their expectations may be about early childhood education specifically. So a lot of this is about parent education in a way that is relatable, in a way that they can understand, and so that they can help make a decision about what is best. So it's not, they're not choosing you because you have clean toilets in your bathrooms. They're choosing you because you have the method of education that will be best for their child's development.
Okay, so from exploration, the next phase is commitment. And can you talk to us about how that's characterized, Matt?
Absolutely. Just because a family enrolls in your school doesn't mean that they're committed. So this is something that you really want to pay attention to, and there are specific things you need to do in this phase of where they are in this life cycle in order to help them get commitment. Lots of times, people are thinking about, well, we'll try this out and we'll see how it goes. I know that's not ideal, and I know that's not what we want, but I think that's reality. So people can be a little bit skittish at this phase until you get them through the end of it. And in order to really move through to the rest of the life cycle, to really get a solid community, you need to really pay special attention to this phase, because it is a common mistake to think that just because a child enrolls, that they're going to be, for instance, that they're going to be committed to the 3-year cycle. How many families do we have where they enroll at 3, and then at the age of 5, you get that Dear John letter saying, "Oh, it's the hardest decision we ever made, but we're going to be enrolling our daughter in the local public school." That's because we did not effectively move them through the commitment phase. So do not assume that that's going to happen just by osmosis, and do not assume that because a family submits an application that they are committed.
And Matt, what are some of the red flags for a lack of commitment that you've seen with some of your families?
So red flags, great question. I would say first it would be about how receptive they seem to the content that you're giving them in this phase. So one of the things that we can do with a lot of our emails is we can, all of our emails, quite honestly, we can see who's opening them, and we can check to see if they're clicking the links in the email, if they're really reading it. That's a good first step to knowing whether or not these people are actually really interested in the context that we're giving them about their child's education. Because if they're completely tuned out to it, they're not going to really going to really be considering whether or not this is something that's completely right for their child. This is more of a temporary solution. So, and this doesn't mean that we expect parents to open and read everything that we send them. That's unrealistic. But if you have families who never open anything, that's a red flag. Other red flags would be, for me, not attending school events, whether that is parent education events, whether that is community events, whether they're not really engaged in the opportunities you are providing to connect with them. So that would be number 2. And number 3 would probably be not being able to follow basic procedures. I realize that, and I know every school deals with this, we are going to have late parents, for instance. It's difficult, right? When you have a child, especially when maybe both parents are working, getting out of the house, adjusting to a new schedule. But if you have a family that is consistently showing up late every day and is not respecting the fact that we have a 3-hour work cycle, and isn't receptive to the fact that when you tell them this is really disruptive for the other children and it disrupts their concentration, et cetera, that is another good indicator that this may not be a family that is willing or able to commit to your school.
And this might be a more difficult question to answer, but when you identify families that have a lack of commitment, are there things you can do to save them?
Well, I mean, they have to be willing to engage with you, and this isn't about the engagement piece, which is the next one coming up. But this is more about if somebody is not open and willing to have conversations with you and really take in what it is you're saying, whether that's digitally, whether that's in person, whether that's in a parent conference. there's not much you can do, right? We can't force them to do something. And this is where, when you have very clear procedures for your parents and you're doing it in an empathetic way, again, this is all predicated on the fact that you've made these expectations known up front. That's another mistake that personally, our school has made in the past, where it's, we weren't necessarily clear multiple times. And it's not just one time. It's not just having it in your handbook and saying, oh, you should have read that handbook. No, it's about being very, very clear about what are the real basic needs that you need in order for the family and child to be successful. If they're not able to follow those, and if they're not willing to really engage in conversations about those, there's not much you can do. So that would be the real prerequisite for that. And in my experience, once you're having a conversation with people, most of them will be willing to really be honest with you about what their needs are. It may take some prodding. You have to be empathetic and patient, but that's where personal conversations tend to work the best.
And commitment is a prerequisite for all of the other stages. The very next stage in the life cycle being engagement. Can you talk to us about that, Matt?
Yeah, so engagement. I would say that it first starts with us, and we have to make their child's experience real. And I know it's a very kind of a broad statement, but we do that by direct parent communication. I'm not the only one that's talked about this. In fact, it's not really my idea. Other people that are much smarter and much more experienced than me have talked about this, but this has to come from the guide. This can't come from a blanket email about Montessori that goes out to all parents. This is a specific outbound communication from a guide where you are noticing and observing something that's happening with your child, and you are relating it back to what you discussed when you were admitting them into the program. So when you're talking about, for instance, a child's burgeoning independence, a picture and a 3-sentence email goes so far to help people be engaged with your school, because what you're saying is, remember what we talked about back then when we talked about how your child's going to become much more independent in school? This is what I'm seeing. Here's an example of this, and I'm really, really pleased about this progress. So we do require guides to have at least one outbound piece of communication a month. I prefer something that is more often than that, but the minimum is that the guide is reaching out to parents once a month to make an observation. And listen, we are trained observers. There should be no excuse why we can't do this. I think what the real barrier is for lots of teachers and schools is, we expect parents to be as excited about pedagogy as we are, and that's just not going to be the case. They're going to be excited about pedagogy as it relates to their child's development, and it is our duty to to put forth the energy and effort and reach out to them. It's not about them coming in and observing, although we really want them to do that. It is about us reaching out to them and making it a priority that they understand what's happening with their child and what we are seeing in their child, and relating it back to what we talked about when we were in the admissions process.
And how do you measure engagement, Matt? What are some of the, we call them key performance indicators, but what are some of the data points or just, core indicators that you look for to identify an engaged family?
Sure. I would say participation at parent education events, participation in community events. I know I mentioned that in the commitment phase before, but this is where we really start to measure that in terms of, are they coming to what we are planning to help them be more engaged with us in the community. So we started doing parent education a little bit differently a couple of years ago. We decided that having parents come at 7:00 on a weeknight and sitting in a tiny chair and listening to a Montessori guy talk about mathematics, for instance, that was a hard sell. They're tired, they've worked all day, their child hasn't eaten dinner yet, they have to find a babysitter, or maybe you're providing something on site. We started doing morning coffees, and it's been super effective for us because they're already at the school in the morning when they drop off. And when we start at 8:30, we can meet for 45 minutes or an hour, and it's the energy level is higher. People are caffeinated, for lack of a better word, and it's much easier for them to be an hour late to work on that day and really connect with the child's teacher and the rest of the families in the classroom than it is coming back at night when they're exhausted. So that's been very, very effective for us. At the elementary level, we have we call them office hours, actually, in the afternoons, where the classrooms are open. There's actually no it's not a meeting per se, but it's an opportunity for the teacher is keeping the classroom open until 5 o'clock, from 3:30 to 5. Parents drop in with their child, and it's the child's opportunity to show them some of the things that they've been working on. Again, we're not talking about a checklist where we're saying this is what I've learned, but this is what I'm really excited about. And the guide is also there to help give context and to visit. And it really, again, is an opportunity for parents to come into the classroom and experience it with their child and really understand their child's excitement about what's going on. So those two things have been really effective. If you weren't seeing any participation at those levels, you know that you have little to no engagement with your family.
And Matt, you can have engagement without retention, right? One doesn't always follow the other.
No, it doesn't. Although, that's, I think, what you should focus on in order to get retention, but it is not a foregone conclusion. Retention is something that has to happen very, very early in order for you to be successful at it. And let me give you an example. So a lot of us will wait to talk about Montessori Elementary until maybe 6 weeks before our moving up night that we're having. And then we have to cram all this information about Montessori Elementary into 6 weeks at a meeting, for instance. That is really not effective. We wind up feeling pressured. We're trying to give them a bunch of information to process, and it doesn't work. We really start talking about Montessori Elementary when the child is 3, and we do it in a variety of ways. We send out a series of emails highlighting individual benefits of Montessori Elementary. We give opportunities for primary parents to interact with our elementary guides. We do those at the coffees as well, so that they can see the person that's actually leading our programs. We do very a lot of pictures, a lot of video from those Montessori Elementary classrooms is sent to the Montessori primary parents so they see what's coming next. Again, you have to be very clear about what's coming next, and the earlier you start that, the better. The benefit that we have in a Montessori school is that we have 3 years, and that's really the only advantage that we have. So we are talking about elementary when they're 3, and we are building that up over time, so that by the time we're actually having the moving up meeting, what we're really talking is about logistics, not necessarily why they should do it, but this is more in the meeting about how they should do it. Here's some of the steps in the process you need to observe. Your child's going to visit. Here are the financial considerations to consider, as opposed to, let me tell you why you should enroll your child at Montessori Elementary. And the danger is that if you start too late, you're just not going to be as effective. So retention is, you have to have engagement in order to move to the retention level. And so, the fact that they're satisfied and they're really engaged with what you're doing at the school helps the retention. But the school, and this really comes from administration, has to be very proactive in how we're communicating about what is coming next. And early and often is the thing that I can just continue to mention, that the earlier you do it and the more often you do it, the more effective it's going to be, and the more children you're going to retain for your school.
And retention is often looked at as the end goal, but we have another phase here, which is advocacy. Can you talk to us about the importance of this phase?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we all know that word of mouth is the most effective form of marketing. And although you can't rely on it completely, we really want to encourage it as much as possible because it's free. And when they refer other families to our school, they're going to bring in usually families that are mission appropriate because they're friends with them. So it is the greatest marketing resource. And you have to be conscious about how you're going to do it. You have to ask them to. This is not something that happens by osmosis. Yes, you will get some referrals automatically from satisfied people, but you can put referral systems into place. We have a referral program at our school where it's really 2 parts. So we're asking them to do it. We're saying, we're really relying on you to help grow a solid school, and we really appreciate your your advocacy, for lack of a better word. But then we also provide a tuition credit for people who have referred other families to our school. They get a $250 tuition credit once the family's been at the school, the new family's been at the school for 3 months. And I know it can sound a little bit trite to people, right? It sounds almost like a little bit too businessy. I will tell you it's effective and people really, really appreciate it. And it has helped us a lot in terms of getting people to take the action we want them to take, which is to tell a friend at work, which is to tell a family member. And it's been really, really effective for us. Another thing at this point that you're doing in terms of advocacy is online reviews. They're not going away. They are getting more and more important, especially as Google's algorithms change. One of the things that you always want to have is positive reviews of your school. And so one of the things that we do is we set up a system in place where when people are leaving our school, so when they're graduating from elementary, if they're moving to another area and they're leaving our school, if they're going to a public school for first grade because they finished the 3-year cycle for primary, we have a system that we have in place where we are asking them for positive reviews. The first question that we ask ourselves is this a positive is this a positive end? Meaning, we're not going to ask somebody who is leaving our school and is not 100% happy to review us. And that still happens with us. That's going to happen with every school for whatever reason. It's just the state of being. But most people that leave our school are happy with what they've experienced. And so we the first question we ask ourselves is this a positive experience for this family? So if it's yes, then we're going to move on to our review questionnaire. And I found personally that this comes best when it's coming from the guide. So we have as part of our email program, we can send out an automatic email that goes to the parents about a week after they've left, saying, it comes from the teacher's email address and it's signed from the teacher. And the teacher is aware of this, that we do this. But it's saying, I'd really appreciate it if you would review our school online. And we include a link to Yelp, to Great Schools, or to Google, depending on where we want the review to go. And we found that that's been an effective way to help build up positive reviews. And one of the things that this does is that the more positive reviews that you have, you will inevitably have a negative review. It happens for whatever reason. But if you can have 10 positive reviews to 1 negative review, that's going to really help build some safety in there for your online review profile. So that's been an effective thing for us, and I would really encourage other people to do it. It's free. It takes a little bit of work on your end, but it is well worth your time and attention in terms of building up positive reviews online for your school.
One of the things I'd like to mention is if you're a NETO member, specifically members in the 3rd and 4th plane, there's a tool available to you as part of your membership. It won't cost you anything additional, and it lets you track online reviews. It alerts you to new reviews, if there are any, and gives you the opportunity to respond. And it has the ability to solicit reviews, for lack of a better word, through kind of a really cool dashboard that links parents directly to the review profile you're targeting. So if you're interested in using that, reach out to us at hello@netomarketing.com. But that would be a pretty powerful tool if you're not already.
Absolutely.
And the very last phase in the life cycle, Matt, is living the mission.
Sure. And this isn't necessarily a phase. This is probably the shortest phase, but this is what we all want. This is why we do this. We are doing this because we believe that Montessori education is the best preparation for life that exists. Dr. Montessori was a visionary, and we believe that if more children can have access to Montessori, if more children go through an authentic Montessori program, that they will go out into the world and make the world a better place, that it's a positive thing for our society. So this isn't necessarily a phase that you're experiencing, but it is the end result of your life's work. It is having, and we've all had this, right, where we have alumni come back and they're telling us about the amazing things that they're doing, and how they are using all the things that they've learned as a Montessori student out in the world. And this is a great time to get those alumni profiles up there. to really make living the mission real to other people, because you are showing them this is the end result of when a child starts at 2.5, or when a child starts at 18 months and goes all the way through this program and leaves us at the age of 12 or 15 or 18, depending on your school community and offerings, that this is what happens. This is what a Montessori graduate, a Montessori alumnus looks like, a Montessori alumni looks like. And it's really it's the best part of the cycle for me, because it makes it obvious why I'm doing this. It reminds me of the importance of our work.
And Matt, before I start taking questions, I wanted to ask if there's anything that you'd like to say, kind of to summarize this topic, the Montessori Family Life Cycle.
Sure. I think that this is really about empathy. Marketing is about empathy, and really about understanding families and understanding where they are as they go through this process. Montessorians on the whole are so talented and empathetic and observant of children. And I think that if we could take that same framework and apply that to families, our schools would grow like weeds, right? Because we're just really, really good at it. For whatever reason, I think that makes us nervous when we start dealing with adults. And it doesn't have to be. I think if you're strategic, I think if you're, I think that if you do things in kind of in a systematic way, and you use your powers of observation, and you remind yourself that people that are enrolling in your school want the best things for their child. They just need help along the way in order to make sense of it, because it's a stressful thing being a parent today, and we are here to help them for that. So use your observation skills. Think about families in the same way in which you think about children, in terms of giving them what they need at certain times in their development in order to help maximize their potential.
Thank you for that, Matt. And the topic for next week is the Montessori Family Avatar. Would you mind introducing that and letting us know what we have to expect?
Sure. This is the last conceptual introduction, I think, that we're doing before we start getting into more tactical things in terms of digital marketing. But with the avatar, what we're really trying to do is paint a picture about the different types of families, the specific families that we're looking to enroll, so that we can better message to them. And the more specific you can be about what their life is like, about what their needs are, what their wants are, what their fears are, what they want for their child, what turns them off, what turns them on, the better you can talk to them. Marketing is about communication, and the more we understand who people are, the better we can communicate with them, and the more we can influence them. So the avatar is really about constructing a profile, for lack of a better word, it doesn't have to be one family, it can be multiple types of families at your school, so that you can understand them, be more empathetic, and just basically have more effective marketing to them.
And if you'd like to join us live, we're shooting these coaching calls every Thursday at 10:30 a.m. Pacific. And to join us, just go to needlemarketing.com/coaching, and you'll be able to register, and we'll field questions, and the recordings will also be made available after the end. Matt, thanks so much for being here. Appreciate your time as always.
It was a pleasure. Look forward to talking to everybody next week.